I've been talking about Hey, everybody. Last few days, I've been talking about like goals and like getting things done and that kind of stuff. And today, I thought maybe it might be good to just really let you know just how like not actually rosy most of this stuff is. Like I talk about long days and to be able to get things done. And if you look at what do I say, the outer edges of accomplishment and stuff like that, it's real. Like real stuff has happened. I've written, I've got 9 books in publication in print. So I've done some things in addition to, and I have a good career. I have a good job, great kids, all that. But the thing about it is, at the end of the day, when you've got goals, when you've got things you're going to do, life happens. All of a sudden, like the title of this one's called "The Floor is Lava." Like you don't know what's going to happen next. You don't know how it's going to go. You're hopping from one thing to another, hoping you don't fall in. And so I'm just going to share kind of a story about my year, because I think that this is a really good example of maybe how you can think about triaging things in your own life, like just understanding that you got realities of family, friends, your faith community, whatever, the world around you. You got tough stuff that could happen at any moment, right? At any moment, all your plans could just go up in smoke. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Then I'm going to get into triage, or like what do you do to triage that kind of stuff, and then talk about your network, like what can you do in the midst of these really trying and difficult times. And then finally, knowing when to like call in, throw in the towel. We're going to do something different. We'll come back to it later. It just can't get done now. So to start out with, I'll just say that like the end of 2024 had me in a pretty solid state in that the side business that I run and my day job were both going very well. Like I had a very good end of the year. My performance reviews were good. The actual business progression was doing what I wanted it to do. So overall, I came into 2025 very hopeful, just generally. Like we had a lot of good plans with budget behind them, and I had planned I just bought the office space. I'm in the studio now; it's fully complete. I bought the office space with these big plans in mind. And one of the biggest plans I had was a retail launch. So the idea was we would actually be going and doing business to business sales to retailers, like Christian bookstores, basically, with the Christian products that I have. We're going to be doing that. I had some big launches in my day job, and so I had done what I felt was a pretty good job of saying, okay, here's the time off that's I'm allotted in a calendar year at work. How am I going to adjust that time off to align to these events that were happening? So basically in February, there were 2 big events. There was the Christian Products Expo, where you go to retailers and you say, hey, I've got these great products. You should put them in your store. And then the very next week was the basically the National Religious Broadcasters Convention. So this is basically a place you go to get on the radio, to get on TV, to go pitch what you're talking about. So the whole intention and the way we had this laid out was, and I have a team, right? Technically my team is mostly my kids, but we had some family friends that are employees. We had and I have a lot of contractors that are sort of third parties that do things. But I had a plan, and it was a pretty solid, it was executable. And so the big thing was we were also going to do a Kickstarter. I was for the first time, I was going to put out a thing for one of my books before it went live. So we had the Kickstarter for Meow Meow Milks the Cow. The idea is we would go to this retailer event and kind of let them know that this was a new product that was coming. We would go out to my network, and if you've seen on my network, there was this whole thing about Meow Meow earlier this year, and then we would promote all of what we were doing at the National Religious Broadcasters. It was going to be a big thing. Had it all kind of lined out, right? We had budget, and the other big thing is all of this required pretty significant pre-commitment of funds, right? Like there was money spent that was non-refundable, but at the same time, in my personal life, my mom was battling cancer. She was it was stage 4 cancer. 6 months earlier, they had said, we're not going to do any more radiation or chemo because we know that, any of the treatments we have now will just accelerate your rate of death, basically. And so this was a pretty big deal. The end of December, I'd had to sort of rush over to see her in Iowa. There was she was hospitalized out of nowhere. Then mid January we bring her home, and there was a whole thing with that. And so there was a lot of just waiting for the other shoe to drop, that knowing that she's in a really bad state and things are not well. She's not well. Things are not going well. And so then about the 1st or 2nd of February, I get a call from my stepdad saying, "Hey, she's on her way out. She's in really bad shape." So I rush over there, and I had been through this with my own father. My father had died of congestive heart failure, and the end of life thing is just a horrible thing to experience with your parent. Nobody prepares you for this, and if I get people asking, I might talk about what did I learn end of life from my parents, that experience. But what I can say about this in specific was, we had a whole list of stuff, right? And I had a job. I'm expected to be 8 to 5, all this. So basically Sunday night, I rush over, see my mom. Monday morning, we're kind of working things out, trying to figure out how we're going to deal with this, because I'm kind of expecting to sort of work remote from my mom's house. It's bad Wi-Fi, middle of nowhere, Iowa, but kind of work the deal, work from there, kind of for the duration. Until she were to pass, I was just going to be there for her and for my stepdad. And that's Monday morning. We're working out those details, and I'm starting to notify my team at my day job, hey, this is what's going on. And later in the afternoon, it suddenly turns into this whole drama with the other side of my family. So my father-in-law ends up hospitalized. My mother-in-law's got some other problems of her own. And so between the two of them, suddenly both sides of my parents on both sides of my family have massive medical issues. And what are you going to do? Because in the midst of this, I had all these launch plans and all these goals I was going to go do. And so it took about 24 hours to triage, to figure out what is going on. At which point it was I can't do this. I just can't do these launches personally. I couldn't be there. And so it turned into kind of a discussion with my team about what are we going to do. Now we felt pretty convicted, right? For us, the selling audio Bibles, selling the content that we sell, that is a sort of a Christian mission for us. And so we felt like we should continue, figure out, is there a way we can continue? But we weren't sure. But at the same time, I needed to be very cognizant of, my day job of, hey, I have a moral responsibility to do right by them as well. I can't be running about the countryside doing my own thing and not doing my day job and all this sort of stuff. So what I ended up doing was I worked out, official leave. Followed all the processes with my boss and everybody, had official leave from that. And then for my side business, I basically just turned it over to my kids. While my kids were definitely affected by the illness of their grandparents, it wasn't the same as me being in the middle of it and actually having to kind of drive back and forth between states to deal with different aspects of this. And so, I kind of checked out of that and just turned the business over to the kids. But at the same time, I was also but I'm just not sure they could go do the pitch part of what we were doing, right? We were going to launch this business where we're selling B2B, and it was if I proceed with that, I can't just leave that in my daughter's hands and, son's hands. I can't leave that in my kids' hands because they're just not experienced, right? They didn't have that experience. They'd never been in that position before of trying to do B2B sales. It was a real problem. And in the process, I had someone in my network that was really, just been on my heart, come back around. We would talk, we would chat periodically. I knew she was a good B2B seller. I knew she could do that job. The question was, could she get up to speed in time to do this? In other words, if I made the connection between this other B2B seller and my daughter, could they figure everything out and could they go do this? And so, quite frankly, I prayed about it, just full stop, sat down one day and just prayed about it. Like, should we proceed with this? Should we just take the loss on it and not do it? Should we proceed with it? Should I invest more heavily? Should I bring this other person into the business that doesn't know really what we're doing yet, other than these random conversations we'd had for about 12 months? And, after praying about it, I was like, yeah, that's the right thing to do. We should still keep going forward. We should still keep things moving, but understand that, I'm really not that involved. I'm having, a phone call with my daughter, an email, once a day, just something quick. This is what's going on, asking my advice, that kind of stuff. But I'm not really working at all, right? Like, that's all happening on its own. And I was like, basically what I was doing was, taking care of my mom at the end stage of cancer. It had a whole bunch of complications to it, dealing with hospice. And then the fact that I actually had to go like out of state to my in-laws to help deal with some stuff there in the middle of it, and like find healthcare providers. Like, I will tell you right now, if you've got to find, 24/7 in-home care on short notice, that is not an easy thing to do. It's actually really complicated. And even when you do find it, you can't guarantee it's good. And so, like, again, that's probably something for a different conversation. But in the midst of this, like I said, there was very much a triage of the situation. And yes, the launches could continue, but I wasn't going to do it. Just full stop. I wasn't there. Like, I had prepared decks. I had prepared this. I had prepared that in advance. And so I guess, one of the big things about this is, especially when you already know something bad could happen. Like, we knew my mom was failing. We knew there were issues there, 6 months earlier, and I'd actually pulled back a bunch. That's probably yet another conversation, is when to just flat say, I've overextended, I've got to pull back all up, because actually 6 months earlier I had pulled in a bunch of things I was doing and just said, no, I can't do this. I got to have some margin to deal with anything that comes up with mom. And then when it happened, I was very prepared in the sense of I had stayed ahead of the curve on all of these preparations, to where really someone else could come in and pick it up. Like, I had a whole sales enablement deck and these other things. So the net of it was, transitioned the launch to the retailers to my daughter and our B2B seller, and they went after that. And then the National Religious Broadcasters. Well, my son was already going to that event because of his actual job, and so he was able to just do the presentation side of that because he'd been working on it. So netted out, I walked away from all of that side stuff and my day job, so I could 100% do, or say 98%. I had, a little bit. I'm, again, answering an email if it comes in, but for the most part, checked out and dealt with this. And so, one of the things though with that was, so that was big ticket items that had a lot of money wrapped up in it. But then I also had a bunch of little things going on. I had 2 other books I was launching. I had the Database Plus. I had my dad joke book that was launching the next month. And then I had, or not the next month, the month after. Anyway, like, technically Meow Meow launched in March, Database in April, and then Logan in May. But I had all these launches lined up. And so that was one of those things where there were definitely some emails to answer as people were asking about that. But for the most part, I just had to step back. Like, I had to let it go. And that's kind of a frustration for me, because I've done, 6 book launches and done everything from, like full on long form video delivery stuff like I did with the Airships versus Dragons thing. I also had like a variety show I put together with a bunch of authors that I just couldn't do anything with. Like, I had all the video with it and I couldn't put that out. I just had all this stuff that I had planned, and pretty much other than those 2 events that already kind of had people aligned to it and a way to execute on it, I just pulled it all in and kind of said, look, if I've paid for it, so there's an agency called Celebrate Lit that helps you promote a new book launch. I was like, I've already paid for this. I will make sure that, my team gets them the information they need to do the launch, and these launches are going to happen. But for the most part, I didn't do any of the stuff I would normally do for all that. So the long and the short of it is, over the next month, my mom's condition deteriorated. My daughter and son went to their events. That worked out. And then, 2 weeks after all of that, my mom passes away. But meanwhile, my in-laws are in a position where we've got to move them into assisted living. So I had a 7-week period there where I just wasn't at my day job. Like I just couldn't. And I also wasn't doing much to run my business. You might have seen an occasional social media post. You might have seen an email here or there, but I just wasn't doing anything. And that was 7 weeks of like prime launch prep for stuff. And so as I close this conversation out, I think that's the big thing of, and if you talk to me much one-on-one, you'll probably hear me say something like, God willing, X is going to happen, right? You might hear me say that pretty regularly. And the reason I say this, it's biblical. It says, don't go and say we're going to do this or go here and sell that, because you never know what God's going to put in your lap, right? It should always be, under the grace of God, with God's wishes, like things can happen. But it really just wasn't the case that I needed to have big launch plans and stuff for these books. Like that just wasn't the plan that God had for this stuff. I needed to spend time with my family. I needed to deal with all of the chaos that ensued. And, literally from February 2nd through, I think, what would it have been? Like May 15th, something like that. I think I was home, like in my own bed 2 weekends in that entire period. And, like every weekend, there was some kind of thing going on, because in the midst of all of it too, in addition to moving my in-laws, all my kids moved into new like homes and stuff. And so basically there were a bunch of things I was going to launch. One of the big things I was going to launch was I was going to launch the entire like Logan versus the Hateful Strawberries, read while listening, homeschool curriculum pack, and like rework my website, do all this stuff. And like just none of it happened. And it really boiled down to, I knew I couldn't do it at quality. Given once all that was over and now I've got time, I just saw there's not a window to do that. And so we took a launch that was supposed to happen in May, and we're kicking it out to September. Like we just dropped the ball entirely. So we're just not doing that. And I think that's the important part, is to go, okay, if I look things over, what's secondary, what's not important, and you get really pointy when the floor is lava on going, this is important and I need to do some stuff. Like this matters, I've got to keep going. But I also think it's really important to be sort of missionally focused. That is to say, what I'm doing on my side business is a mission to me. Like getting God's word into people's ears is something that matters to me. And so I'm going to figure out how to prioritize that as best I can, even if the priority is actually we're going to do nothing new. We're going to stop all the new stuff. We're going to do very steady state to keep it running, what's running at quality, and otherwise we're doing nothing. And so, I guess the other side of this, though, is because it's a family business, we also just had I don't want to call it, the freedom to go, you know what, we're just not making money. Like we shut down completely to deal with funerals and moving and all this sort of stuff. Like, I think as an employer of people, it was very clear to my staff that I was paying for that people were going to get paid. But at the end of the day, like there was a lot of grief, a lot of sadness, a lot of bad stuff going on. And so we just dealt with it, right? Like we just said, look, we're just not making money. We're going to have to figure this out. And in the end, I mean, there definitely was, financial impact on multiple levels, like a bad launch for a book. It's hard to make up that initial momentum. If you don't get it when it first comes out, you've got to create a new moment. And so I don't know how I'm going to create the moment for Meow Meow Milks the Cow. I think that book I've gotten really great feedback on it, but the launch was kind of flat just because of everything that went on. And I know I can do something with Logan and the database. I just did that book because it was fun. So, but regardless, what I would say is if you're in that situation, right? So you've just had life hit you. I think the first thing is recognize you're on lava, right? Like the floor has become lava. You can't do what you thought you were going to do. And then ask yourself, what is on mission? What is it that has to get done because it's tight, it's on mission, it's the thing I need to do. And once you've figured out what's on mission, just start saying no at scale. Like, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that, I'm not doing the other, and figure it out as you go along. So that, hope this is helpful to somebody. And, I'll see y'all next time.